Welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Go PvP. In this one we're taking a look at a recent Boulder Cup tournament I competed in and the closest match from it. So I hope you enjoy and get something out of it. Cheers! The tournament I competed in was ran by mates of people I play Pogo with. The tournament had about 10 people in it and consisted of 4 rounds. Here you can see I lead my Magneton, expecting a Skarmory lead. Magneton was one of only 2 counters that I bring for a Skarmory, and it actually does pretty good. Here I set off a Magnet Bomb trying to waste a shield, but for some reason my opponent didn't shield, which I thought was very risky considering it could have been electric and taken him out with one hit. Here I shield up, but you can see Magneton did very good against Skarmory there. Just that Zap Cannon takes too long to charge up, and that sort of hurt me, so I switch out here, getting away from the fire disadvantage and bring in my fire coverage with Whiscash. So let's charge that water up, get the water off hopefully. Now this is interesting here. I take this hit thinking I would survive it, and the overheat wipes me out. As you can see in the graph on screen, fire is resisted. So that just shows Blaziken's power. Even being underleveled for the Great League, he still hits really hard. Here I don't mind this matchup. Medicham does well against other fighting types because of his psychic typing. I just quickly get this Ice Punch off just to finish off the Blaziken, just in case he doesn't set off a charge move before he faints. Which actually works out pretty well because my opponent uses his last shield, and then I see why, because he has a charge move ready to go. So that shield he used was a last ditch effort to get his charge move off. Now with 2 Pokemon remaining each, the battle's getting towards the pointy end, no shields remaining. So I set off an Ice Punch. Ice is nice neutral damage against Skarmory. Taking a look at the type chart on the screen, you can see Skarmory has a lot of resistances and only 2 weaknesses, being fire and electric. If you look closely, you also notice water, ice and fighting all do neutral damage, which if you don't have a fire and electric handy or left in the battle, water, ice and fighting are really good moves to try and hit neutral damage on Skarmory and just trying to get as much HP chunked off as possible. So GG to my opponent, he takes out first battle and then we go for the second one. This time I decide to lead off Whiscash and he goes with his Skarmory again. The only 2 counters I bring for Skarmory were my Magneton and Camerupt, and I found out early on in the tournament that Camerupt was not going to do too well for me. And also with ground types being everywhere, Magneton was kind of getting destroyed as well. So I was relying on my Blizzard from my Whiscash to try and deal with Skarmory's, which isn't really too good of a strategy, but I was trying to make it work. Also, another way I was dealing with Skarmory was with my Medicham, with Dynamic Punch and Ice Punch both doing neutral damage. However, that's not very optimal because Skarmory has the flying type advantage and really puts the hurting on Medicham, so I was kind of trying to avoid that where possible. But I was finding myself in that situation from time to time, so I was just trying to deal with it as best as possible and potentially use, if I had any shields at the time, use them to protect Medicham. So Fortress is something I only started using halfway through the tournament, and I really wish I used it from the beginning. It did really well for me. Its Earthquake took out a lot of things, its Heavy Slam got set off very quickly, and its bulky nature let it stick around for a while. So I feel like I should have used Fortress a little bit more than I did. Up against Skarmory, it turns into a bit of a stalemate with the 2 steel types, but I just try and chunk as much damage as possible from it, knowing that when I get rid of Skarmory, my Medicham has free reign, so that's sort of my mission at the moment. But just while we're on the topic of Fortress, you can see here on the graphic on screen, he only has 1 weakness. It is a double weakness, so you do have to be careful of fire types, but generally they weren't too common in this tournament. I mean, people had maybe 1 on their teams to deal with Skarmory, but generally that was about it. So with that in mind, I feel like Fortress was very viable in the Boulder Cup, and he also gets access to coverage moves like Earthquake, which takes out a lot of the Pokemon in the Boulder Cup. Going back to the battle on screen now, you can see it's just a matter of time before my Medicham takes out this Steelix. I've still got the Protect up my sleeve, which I use here, and I've got the type advantage with the fighting type, so it's only a matter of time before I take him out. And this battle's gone a little bit better for myself, and I managed to square it up 1-1 So we'll go into the decider match next. In this third and final round, I decided to take in my same team that I used in the previous round. My train of thought here is it did well then, so I'm kind of hoping it gets me over the line in this decider. My opponent cleverly brings his Breloom this time to deal with Whiscash, and I'm not having any of that, so I switch out straight away and bring in Fortress, which is cleverly countered by my opponent with the Blaziken switch in. And now my opponent has the upper hand, no more switch-ins allowed, and he has the type advantage. So here I risk it for the biscuit. I charge up to my Earthquake and I pray that my opponent doesn't expect it, which he doesn't, catches him off guard and wastes his Blaziken, which puts me in a good spot now. Breloom sets off a Seed Bomb. I take it knowing it's not very effective, and Fortress does more work again. So with Whiscash having a disadvantage, there was no way I was going to bring him in now, and Medicham is my counter against other fighting types, so it's a no-brainer for me. I go with him. Not to mention too, he has access to Ice Punch, which is super effective against Breloom. So my objective here is to try and set off as many of them as possible, waste shields, and hopefully knock out Breloom. Ice Punch is all charged up, so we're going to set that off, and my opponent uses one of his shields, which now makes sense knowing that he has a charge move ready to go himself. Now with Breloom going down, this really sets up the end of the match for myself. I've got the Pokemon count advantage 2-1, although my opponent does have a shield remaining, so it's going to be a close one. So this is where the battle gets interesting. Knowing that my opponent has one shield left, I opt just to set off an Ice Punch as soon as possible to waste that shield. Now with the shield gone, I need to be thinking about doing as much damage as possible, and using this second Ice Punch isn't the right move. I should have gone for Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch has a higher power output and also receives stab damage bonus multipliers, meaning that it would have done more damage than Ice Punch, and you'll see at the end of the battle it ends up costing me. So now it's down to Skarmory versus Whiscash, no shields left, just raw damage. I decide to go for Broke and charge up a Blizzard, thinking it's my last ditch effort, I've got to try and do as much damage as possible in this last attack. So now it all comes down to this. Oh, doesn't quite get him. Skarmory survives with a slither of health. In return gets off his last Brave Bird, which I'm pretty sure Whiscash wasn't going to be able to take it, and as you see there, he doesn't. So you can see that Medicham using that second Ice Punch rather than using a Dynamic Punch is what really hurt me at the end. I feel like if that had been a Dynamic Punch, that little bit extra health would have been the difference between Skarmory surviving and not surviving it. And wow, what a close finish. That was a really good battle, the closest one of the tournament for myself. So hope you enjoyed it, guys. Stay tuned for more Pokemon Go PvP. Cheers.